Hiring more people of colour doesn't dismantle structural racism within an organisation. A white dominant organisation could hire 100 people of colour, but if the policies and the practices stay the same, that's 100 more people that can be harmed by them. We're here for transformation, not tokenism. And that is a tweet by McKinsey Mac. Hey everybody. Hell, the way tiredness is licking me off today. Wow, is so wow. I've got a strong cup of coffee. I've got a new coffee machine. If you've been following me on my Instagram, you know how much I love my Nespresso coffee machine. So I've got a very strong cup of coffee here. You guys that follow me on my social media, you guys know who I am. I'm Toya Washington. If you follow me on my personal Instagram page, which is Toya_Washington, then you'll know that once a month I do a segment on there called Vagina Chronicles. And I basically teach all women how to navigate their personal hygiene, starting with the vagina, because that's where life begins, from the vagina. But I'm not going to spoil it. It's completely different from Toya Talks in that it focuses on all women in terms of personal hygiene. But as you know, with the Toya Talks platform, we're focused on Black women as we navigate the social aspects of the workplace and light up the path of our own success. That's why we have Toya Talks. But that's why I'm a bit tired, because a lot of work goes into Vagina Chronicles, a lot. And then I get all the feedback, which is amazing. And, you know, it's just a lot. And, you know, the last couple of days, I've just been thinking about all the things that I've achieved this year, because I feel like sometimes it's easy to forget because of this madness that is the pandemic. And I realised a few things that, number one, I've achieved a lot of the things that I planned to, and a lot of things I didn't know that I needed to achieve to get to where I am. Number two, I've learned that I don't celebrate my wins. I'm not kind enough to myself to celebrate my wins. And in therapy, I've had to kind of explore the reason why I'm not kind enough to myself. And number three, I think there is a lot going on. Like, I run a business, I've got a business, and then I've got another business, and I'm literally developing another one. So by January next year, I'm going to have three businesses, which is nuts. I've got a new contract as well, which I'm really happy about. And I just love the fact that I have a limited company and I can effectively use the skills that I have developed, that I have worked hard for, and I'm able to make a living out of it, which is amazing. You guys know I love my career a lot. And being able to also come on here each and every week on the podcast and talk to you guys, because more importantly, more than anything else, I just want Black women to win. And when I receive your messages, your DMs, when I receive your emails about how the Toya Talks platform has transformed your life, I don't think you guys truly understand how that motivates me each and every day, each and every week. And sometimes when I just feel like I just can't, and I'm just tired and I want to sleep and I just want to switch off from the world, there's always somebody that God uses as an angel to remind me that not only am I doing the Lord's work, but I'm walking in my purpose. And as I'm walking in my purpose, God will just give me the strength. But I definitely need to take the time to be kinder to myself. So in December, I don't know what date yet, but I'll let you know. Obviously, December's Christmas. I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to take a couple of weeks off and return in the new year. And that's just me being kind to myself. And obviously you guys know I'm writing a book, and being a dyslexic woman writing a book is so difficult. And I need to commit to the process, and I definitely have ensured that I've tried as much as possible to take you guys on the journey within my social media. So I'm very, very active on Snapchat. My handle is Toya Washington, all one word. And, you know, that's where I feel like I'm very interactive, and a lot more people are interactive with me, I feel, on Snapchat. And that's because the journey of Toya Talk started there. And you guys on Snapchat basically said to me, Toya, please make sure this book is audio. And of course, you know, it's something that I've had to factor in because I'm dyslexic, and sometimes it's easier for me to read a book or listen to a book via audio. Sometimes I read physical books, but because of my attention span, so a day like today where I'm really tired, reading a book is a waste of time. I need to listen to an audio. And for me, I want this book that I'm writing to be accessible to all, irrespective of anything. And I don't want any barriers to access the book. So I've had to kind of work out how I'm going to do this audio, because I'm funding this whole book myself. Like, I have no publishing deal. I'm doing this all myself. And actually, my publishers are you. Each and every one of you that listens, accesses, and supports the Toy Talks brand. Every one of you who refers a friend or tells somebody about the podcast and the Toy Talks platform. You guys are my publishers, literally. And I couldn't do this without you guys. So I really want to say thank you. And I know I say thank you a lot, but I'm so grateful. Like, gratitude is at the forefront of how I feel when describing how the Toy Talks platform is growing, and talking about successes as well. Last week, the podcast, not in a certain section, I mean the actual Toy Talks podcast, charted at its highest chart at number 30 on Apple's podcast platform. Apple 30. Like, can we deep this? This is like last week, Wednesday, Thursday. And there was just so much happening. Obviously, you know, it's Black History Month, so I didn't really get an opportunity to kind of like celebrate it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that on the podcast. As is always, I've received a lot of dilemmas. But I wanted to talk, before we get into like the dilemmas which are pertinent to this whole podcast episode, I wanted to talk to you guys about a reality show that I watch called The Real Housewives of Potomac. And the reason I love it is because it's all Black women. And I love seeing successful Black women on TV. Like, it really makes my heart dance. And Potomac is very kind of like bougie, you know. I love Karen Huger. I love her. She's my spirit sister, like spirit auntie. Like, she's amazing. But I did tell everybody on Instagram, if you haven't already, if you could go ahead and watch The Real Housewives of Potomac season 5? Episode 9 and 10. So it's the most recent season, but it's episode 9 and 10. And what we see is two Black women, a lady called Monique and another called Candice. Monique is slightly older than Candice. Candice is, I think, the youngest in the group. Without boring you guys and spoiling it for you, there's a lot of tension between them, okay? And fundamentally, a lot of the tension comes from the fact that Monique is like struggling in her personal life, in her marital life, and there's a lot of rumours surrounding kind of her allegedly having an affair. And there is a particular person who is spreading this, who is not part of the Real Housewives of Potomac group. And apparently Candice has befriended this person. So I think that kind of added to the tension between Monique and Candice. Up until that point, they got on really well. It's like a big sister, little sister relationship. Now, in episode 9, we kind of see the tension building between the both of them. But one thing I have to point out with Candice is that Candice is very apologetic. Whether it's sincere or not is irrelevant. I think personally it is quite sincere. And anytime there's been an issue that has kind of come about, Candice is quite open and forthright in owning it and apologising. Monique, on the other hand, has been quite shady. And underneath it all, it's because of this whole issue of surrounding her marriage. Like, you can tell, right? So in episode 10, it comes to a head, as it always does. And this is why, for me personally, if I've got an issue with you, I will tell you. And that's my friendship groups. I've got to tell you, I've got to get it out, because if I allow it to fester, it will come out in other ways. And it will come out in a way that isn't necessarily going to be very complimentary of my character. So it's better that if we have an issue, I take you to one side, we have the conversation. Even if we don't agree to disagree. The most important thing is that I've had the opportunity to table whatever my issue is. So in episode 10, we see Monique and Candice. They're at a winery, a public winery in a public setting. Candice kind of, makes a like very flippant comment. It's nothing, okay? But Monique gets really angry. And they start to kind of get into each other's faces, but there's like a big table in between the both of them. And Monique starts flicking Candice's hair. And, they're going back and forth. I can't remember what they were saying. And Monique says, do you want some? Do you want it? Do you want it? And before you know, Monique has pulled Candice's hair, which is a wig, slammed her head on the table, and they start to scrapping. They're literally separated by security. Monique then tries to run up on Candice again, is stopped. It's just a fucking mess, okay? It's a complete mess. Some days later, so I think this is episode 11, or later on in episode 10 actually, one of the other ladies calls a meeting with all the women at the request of Monique. Obviously, Candice is not there. And basically, Monique begins to start saying that she blacked out all of this shit, all of this, that Candice provoked her, all of this, and she blacked out her temper, etc., etc. Now, the reason why I wanted you guys to kind of watch this episode is because I want to talk about provocation. Because I feel as though it's important that we have this discussion, because provocation is not just for people who have tempers. Anyone can be provoked. Anyone. I can be provoked. I've been provoked many, many a times. I've told you guys in past episodes where one girl in the office told me she was going to shank me, and literally it had probably been because she'd seen something on TV. She probably watched Top Boy, and then she thought it'd be funny. She'd come in the office and say that to me. That is provocation. Do you understand? Because if someone says to you in the office, I'm going to shank you, the first thing you're going to say is, what do you mean? And then you're going to get to cussing. That's how it's going to end up, because effectively this person's threatened your life. But I digress. But the reason why I wanted to do this episode on provocation is because provocation isn't an excuse, you know. It isn't an excuse. But in my 20s, in my immaturity, it was an excuse, because I couldn't control my emotions. So in not controlling my emotions, the excuse was I was provoked. But as a black woman in an office space, and when I say in an office, we're all working remote, but you work for a company. Whether you like it or not, we are plagued with stereotypes, okay? And I'm done with trying to dismantle stereotypes. White people, non-black people are going to think what they're going to think about black people. My job is not to change the way they think. My job is to manage a situation that lights up the path of my success, that creates a pool and a large earning potential for me to be financially secure and successful. That's my aim. That's my objective in organizations. I'm not one of these deep and meaningful people. You know, I want to see the company do this. Yes, of course you want the company to do well, but I don't get all deep and meaningful. Nah, I'm not into that. I'm very transactional. And maybe part of it is because I'm a contractor. I don't know. But I have just learned to understand that if this is not my father's company, I can't invest heart, mind, body, and soul. No. What I need to do is concentrate on being a subject matter expert and being great at my job. Now that is my job. So you often hear me talk about the systematic racism in organizations, and that is mainly because a lot of people who are sitting on the senior management team or in management positions of influence are white people, okay? And they hold the majority. And therefore, you find that they tend to recruit people who are like them. Effectively, that's what they do. So when you are now looking at a management structure, you might find maybe a token person of colour, and I don't like the phrase person of colour, but you know what I mean, that ticks the tick box of BAME. But the people that are making the decisions, the decision makers, are white people. I definitely have seen where, you know, organisations are trying to make sure that organisations are more, from a senior management level, reflective of the different backgrounds in their employees. But we're not where we need to be yet, because then we need to talk about the pay disparity and stuff like that. So for me, I find that the structure in workplaces is predominantly white. Yeah, it follow me here. And then you're in organizations whereby either you're the only one, you're one of a couple, but you're a minority as a black woman. And I genuinely believe that the colonial masters have literally written a book somewhere of how to provoke black people. Honestly, because I genuinely believe that in the workplace, especially, white people know how to provoke black people. And then they use the excuse of, oh, it's all in your head. Oh, no, you're too sensitive. And they gaslight. And the gaslighting is a form of provocation. You're provoking me. What is provocation? It's causing me, or using something, saying something, but something that causes me to react in a negative way. And effectively, something that causes me to react in a negative way and causes a situation that is intentional. I believe that provocation is intentional, because you know that when you do something, you're going to get a reaction, or at least somebody is going to react in a way that maybe you don't like. Provoking somebody to get some people say like provocation is not always negative, that you can kind of provoke someone to get a certain reaction. It's still provocation. The responsibility as black women, as a black woman, that I have found is to manage those situations and how you frame those situations. What do you mean by how I frame those situations? The hardest thing to do in a situation where you're provoked is control your emotions. It's one of the hardest things to do, because your knee-jerk reaction is your immediate reaction, and it is either to switch, it is either to kind of meet that person where they are. But we know that the stereotype that plagues us is, if we meet that person where they are and give it to them the way they're giving it back to us, everyone forgets about what the situation is at hand, and the focus becomes that black woman. I have been through that numerous of times in my early 20s, when nobody ever schooled me or educated me on how to navigate work. I fell into that trap so many times, and I was always right, but I was always wrong because the way I handled it. So nobody cared about what the truth was. No one cared about morality. It was more about controlling the situation and making it go away, because that's what white people do in the workplace. Like, white people genuinely, I believe, they don't like confrontation. That's why they do things like kind of backhandedly, and when you call it to the forefront, they see you as a troublemaker, they see you as the instigator. So I had to learn very quickly how to navigate work, and the way I learned how to do it is studying white people, because studying white people in the world of work, they're very similar in the way they handle things. The blueprint isn't different. Like, the blueprint is always the same. And I found that people in positions of power who were white people in the workplace also knew how to provoke. So it could be a new manager that comes in and then immediately befriends everybody, and then before you know it, they've put you through a restructure, and it's like, hang on, when you started here as the manager, you told us our jobs were safe. That's provocation. You're provoking people to react in a negative way, because you've caused people to not only rely on your word, but to trust you and to trust the authenticity in which you have shown people. Provocation can be with a colleague in an email where they're sarcastic, or they're having a dig at you, but somebody else looking at this email wouldn't necessarily see it that way. That's provocation. But I am more concerned about how you manage that provocation. I've given you the example of the Real Housewives of Potomac, and it's quite an extreme one because they actually got physical. I'd like to believe that you guys don't get physical at work, or even less so during a pandemic, because you're all working remotely. But the reason why I gave that example of the Real Housewives of Potomac is because if you watch it closely, you always knew they were going to fight. You always knew it. But the journey to that fight was so interesting. It was the provocation, it was the inability to actually communicate properly on a level that was understood. And actually, the smart person was Candice, and I'll tell you why. Monique was really clear about how she was reacting to whatever was happening. Yeah? I can't sit here and say Candice outwardly provoked Monique, but I would say that she did provoke her in her actions. So befriending somebody who used to be a friend of Monique's, who is now spreading rumours about Monique's marriage. You befriending them, knowing that you and Monique were once friends, that's provocation. But the way Candice did it was, anytime there was an issue or something was brought up by Monique, Candice would just apologise. Yeah? She literally killed Monique with kindness. That's what she did. And in killing her with kindness, in that situation in the winery, to be honest, I don't think Candice should have kind of squared up with Monique the way she did. And actually, when it came to flicking of the hair, I believe it was Candice that flicked it first. Provocation. Because she knew exactly how Monique was going to react. She would return the favour and flick her hair. But not flick her hair gently. Flick it almost aggressively. And then it got aggressive. But what I saw there was Candice. Basically, she wants Monique out of the group. She does. She's irritated now. She's had enough. But Monique didn't handle it very well. When you are in the workplace and you hold your emotions on your sleeve, you wear it on your sleeve for everyone to hear. Believe me, the people that you work with, the people who don't want to see you in your position, the people who don't want to see you flourish, will find ways to provoke you and play on the emotion that you are showing them. And whether you like it or not, you have to start seeing workplaces for what they are. This emotional investment that you have in a workplace, when your emotional investment is not met, and organizations, managers alike, let you down, they provoke you into reacting and behaving in a way that's unbecoming of you. And as soon as you act in that way, you are labeled unprofessional. And then every single thing you do thereafter is scrutinized. Everything you do thereafter is not good enough. Everything you do thereafter is critiqued to a scale in which you now begin to think, they're trying to manage me, they're trying to get me out, they're trying to make me uncomfortable. And there's nothing worse than being uncomfortable in a role in which you were once comfortable, or being uncomfortable in a role whereby you haven't actively done anything that you feel would warrant or justify the treatment that you are receiving. But you have to be responsible for the way you manage things. So when you go into a new organization, you've got to do your due diligence. I've told you guys this so much. Who are the troublemakers? Who's the kiss ass? Who is the problem starter? Who is the provocator? Who is the person that provokes problems? Who is the person that is the chatty patty? This is what you have to do. And if you're already in your organization, it's not too late. You have to start deciding how you are going to manage your career. Is this a job or is this a career? Because if it's a career, you're going to have to manage this strategically. If this is just a job, then your interaction at work should be a bit more transactional and less emotional. There is a clear difference between a job and a career. And you've got to decide whether this where you work now is a job or a career. Because if it's a career, then you have to be invested in the strategy that you're using to, number one, work your way up and keep the job. And number three, you have to now figure out, how can I get the best out of this job? Because this job for me is a short-term 2-year thing. But in this 2 years, I've got objectives and I've got goals and I need to be able to achieve them. And you need to be strategic. And I promise you, there's more provocation in career-based jobs than just a job. Because now you're investing time, you're investing skill development. And I think it's important that you know the difference between a job and a career. Now, when I talk about provocation, I want to talk about framing. I've been in situations in the workplace where I know that if it was outside the workplace, it'd be a completely different story. You can't step to me and chat shit like this. You know they say chat shit, get banged. You couldn't come to me in the same... I really do think people in the workplace take a liberty. It's the type of liberty they take that they know outside they would never do. And they almost relish in the ability to they relish in the ability of almost making you so uncomfortable, and you also knowing that they can do this because they're in the workplace. And it also almost ties your hands. It does. The way people talk to you, the way people deal with you, refer to you, like treating you as though you are nothing. All those are acts of provocation. So I want to get onto a framing, and I've had to learn this year. I've had to learn it from a business perspective, but from a career perspective, I've always known about framing. And framing is how you position things, right? And most of that is dependent on how you react. If there is a situation that happens, you have to, in that heightened state of emergency, take a step back. It's one of the hardest things that you are ever going to have to do in a situation where you have unjustly been provoked. But I promise you, in taking a step back, you're giving yourself the opportunity to strategically manage a situation. By taking a step back, you're giving yourself the opportunity to narrate how you are going to frame this. I've told you, like, I think very early on in season 1 about having a meeting with a manager to do with a contract, and they threw a piece of paper at me and actually gave me a paper cut. Provocation. But in those situations, it is almost expected of you to just accept it. But it's about framing. The way I framed it was that I didn't react. And I questioned my manager, who was actually in the room at the time, who did nothing. And organisations owe you a duty of care. And when they have not utilised that duty of care, depending on how I've managed that situation, I get to frame it so that the organisation understands that I know what you owe me, which is a duty of care. These are my issues. This has been my response. Protect me. It's all about framing. A lot of you will find yourself in situations where you're right, but how you react makes you so wrong. And I've seen a lot of reactions whereby you guys will be sending these Aaliyah 10-page letters. And I'm just like, you guys need to understand something. Human resources has a folder on each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. And depending on your HR business partner or your HR manager, these organizations on a senior management level with HR, they've got names for all of us. Let me help you to understand. They've got names for everybody. I remember one workplace I was working at, there was this one woman, older woman. The problem with her, she was always on the offensive, always reacting. These people will be trying to manage her out. And part of it is ageism. But the other side of it is that she was an easy target because she made herself an easy target. Every time there was a situation, and it could be just a simple misunderstanding, i.e. where colleagues are just misunderstanding, no aggression or nothing, she will put in a grievance complaint for race discrimination. She was always quick off the mark. She never did her due diligence, never gathered evidence, didn't have a burn folder. You know, guys, how often I talk about this burn folder. She was just quick to react. And then one day, I came in really early to the office. It was during the summer. And you know, like, it gets light early. Like in the summer, for some reason, I always used to turn up to work on time, but in winter, less so. And I remember coming into the office, and as I sat there, I was the first in the team to arrive, but my boss was there. And HR had come downstairs to speak to my boss. Now, because of the role I played in that organisation, and when I say role, I mean from a personality perspective, I was very hardworking, but I didn't get involved in their bullshit. And they knew that I wasn't interested in their bullshit. So it also meant that they weren't on guard with me. So they'd always talk around me. So I would hear what's going on and then watch it play out in the office. And this is exactly what happened. And the HR business partner said to my boss, "Oh yeah, we've got another complaint from her. Yeah, always about race discrimination. Everybody's being racist towards her. But you've got a lot of black people in the team, so I don't understand what the problem is." And the way my boss looked at the HR manager like, "Toy is black. Do you not see her there?" But she was chatting. And for me, what was so poignant about that exchange between my old boss and the HR business partner is they'd already labelled this lady. So her cards were already marked. But she never understood the importance of framing. Anything that would happen. So now she was just a person that always would, there's a word for it, I can't remember what it is. Crying wolf, that's it. Always crying wolf. And what she did, that woman, she fundamentally makes it difficult. Now, if somebody has a legitimate race discrimination claim or allegation, she makes it difficult for all the rest of us to be believed because that's what she goes to all the time. And she doesn't frame things in a way whereby people can see that there's a catalogue of behaviour or there's a pattern of behaviour. There is no logic, only emotion. Because she thinks that if she just throws that out there, it will scare them into treating her right and keeping her on side and not trying to manage her out. But all that did was give them the power to understand that, okay, we know how she's going to react. This is her pattern of behavior. We will now start building a case to get her out. And that's what they did, you know. They got her out within 6 months. Yeah. They started scrutinizing her work. They didn't give her any training for certain things. They made sure that the high value contracts that were actually, to be honest, not necessarily things that she would deal with, they will give it to her because they know that she'll mess it up. And then they'll get her now on being negligent at work and then put her on a warning. After she got her second warning, I knew that she's going to be out. But because her mouth is mad, I couldn't even go to her and say, my fellow black auntie, listen, these people are going to get you out. I couldn't even say that to her because I know that she would quickly throw me under the bus. And you know why? Because she was so emotional about everything at work. And I think part of it has come from the way they treated her. But she made herself a target because she, number one, was so emotive, but she never understood how to frame things. Never, ever understood how to frame things. She didn't understand the concept of sometimes letting things go because you know that thing that is gone in your burn folder and there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger pie. She never understood it that way. Framing is the difference between whether you get a yes or a no. Framing is the difference between whether you are believed or not. And that's the truth. There was a young lady that sent me a DM. And to be honest with you, I was a bit, I don't know how to explain this. I feel like sometimes when I tell you guys certain things that have happened in certain dilemmas, it opens the floodgates. And ultimately, I just need you guys to understand is, I have my own career. And Toy Talks platform, the dilemmas I receive, they have to be able to help everybody. Do you understand? For me to be able to discuss it, I feel like if you need consultation, I can't give you that consultation one-on-one. I'm sorry, I can't. Because I run a business, I do business to business. And I feel like if you've got a dilemma, your dilemma has to be as such whereby it will benefit everybody. That is where I'm invested in educating everybody to understand, number one, what the dilemma is and how to manage it, because it benefits the masses. When a dilemma is just benefiting you, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair on me, and it's not fair on the fact that other people can't now benefit from that because it's just, do you understand? But I digress a little bit, and I'm going to come back onto this point in a minute. But this lady reached out to me, having heard Briefcase Bandicoot episode, season 2, episode 28, where I managed to help a young woman negotiate an £18,500 settlement. Completely different circumstances. If you want to hear a bit more about that, go ahead and have a listen. But this woman had reached out to me. And to be quite honest with you, I just felt like I really don't have the time for this, because she sent me this long message, and I think she'd even sent me an email. And I thought, you know what, Toya, just hear her out. And she said to me that she's quite happy to pay for consultation. I said, I don't do individual consultations, right? I only do business to business. She goes, how much would you charge? And I knew it, like, you know, that's why I work with businesses, because their budget's bigger. And she says, you know, I can't pay that. And I says, I know, but that's why I only work with businesses. And, you know, she said a few other things. And I said, okay, you know what? My spirit is telling me to just hear what you have to say. So that's what I'm going to do. So I set up a Zoom call. And she started telling me about her issue. Long story short, she basically went to ACAS, and ACAS is like an intermediary mediator, if you like, between an organisation and potentially an employee who's potentially looking to go to an employment tribunal because there's been a breach of someone's employment rights. And without going into too much detail, ACAS tried to mediate between this young lady and the organisation, but it broke down, okay, as it does often. But during the mediation, they basically said to her, how much do you want? How much do you want to settle this so we don't go to court? And she said, I believe 20,000. So I asked her, I says, before you continue this story, what is the 20k based on? And she says, I don't know, I just picked out a number. And I was just looking at her like, okay, so there was no logic to it. You just picked it out. She said, yeah. I said, okay. So her saying that 20k was emotive. It was filled with greed. It is greed. It is what it is. You know me, I'm going to say the truth. And I said the truth to her. It's greed and ignorance. They came back and they said to her, 15k. And within like 10 minutes, they were like, no, we're sorry. We didn't mean 15k. We meant 1,500. Yeah. Remember, she didn't get me involved in any of this. This is what she's telling me. Then she reads to me her ET1. Now, an ET1 is basically a statement when you're basically going to the court and you're hoping to go to an employment tribunal, you fill out an ET1. And in that ET1, you basically state and stipulate what employment rules were broken, the situation that's happened, what you need from the court. She began to read this. Now, because I'm dyslexic, I can say this, and all my dyslexic people, you know what I'm saying. I've got a really short attention span, okay? So when you're reading something, within the first 5 minutes, you need to have caught me. This young woman was reading it like it was a story. There was reams of it. I think it was maybe up to 10 pages. And my head was spinning, going round and round and round and round. And then I'd stop her halfway. I'd be like, asking her questions because she was mentioning all different colleagues. She was mentioning this. She took me on a roundabout. You know the roundabout at Elephant and Castle in London? I went round that roundabout through this ET1 about 4 or 5 times. I was confused. My head was hurting. And basically I had to tell her, I said, this is rubbish. This is absolute crap. And she looked shocked. And I said to her, listen, if you've come to me, you're going to hear what I am going to say to you. Because you're not going to like anything I say. But that's why you've come to me, because you know what I'm about. I said, this is trash. This is nonsense. I said, throughout this whole thing you're reading, I don't actually know what your claims are. I don't know. So I said, right, I need to organise this in my mind. So there were certain things that I recalled that she had said, and I had about 4 or 5 headers. One of them was race discrimination, sex discrimination, because obviously she was on maternity leave, came back, they never gave her any training, they changed the fundamental aspects of her job. When you come back off maternity, it's a staged return, a phased return. That didn't happen. In fact, there were instances where she was humiliated in front of a customer, in front of everybody. So I could clearly see what the headings were. So I said to her, this is a heading, put this here, slot this here, slot this here. So I basically told her how to construct this. And I says, this story, I'm so sorry. You're going before white judges to tell them that their fellow white people have racially discriminated against you. So when you are applying to a court, you're going to give statement. It needs to be straight to the point. All of this 10 pages is null and void. There's nothing here. You're not telling me nothing here. In fact, I'm an outsider and I still don't know what your case is. I don't understand what you're doing here. And it's confusing, and you're involving people that shouldn't even be involved. We need to know what employment law has been contravened. Give me the example, give me the date, full stop. Every section should have 1 paragraph. It shouldn't be longer than a page. It doesn't take long, at best, a page and a half. She listened and she structured it how I said. And I said to her, what do you want out of this? What is the end goal? She said, do you know what, Toya? I just want to be paid off. I've had enough of this. Is too much for me. I said, so you just want to be settled? She said, yes. I said, okay. I want you to read the response from the other side. Within the first 10 seconds, I understood what their counter argument was for the organisation. It was clear and straight to the point. I said to her, they're going to chew you up and spit you out. I'm going to tell you this now. She also told me that the other side, up until recently, they were dealing with it internally. HR was dealing with the legal responses. Now this organisation has gone and got a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a barrister. She said that she went and did the research about the barrister. Her heart was beating and this and this. I said, do you think this was child's play? Did you think this was child's play? Sis, when you decided you wanted to go into employment tribunal, they then decided to go and get somebody who can kind of represent them. That's how it's done. Now, the court will be sympathetic because you are, I can't remember what the legal term is, but basically she's a sole litigant. So she's basically representing herself. But at the end of the day, you've brought them all here. And I said, I need to let you understand. If you lose this case, the other side can petition for costs. Whether that cost will be granted or not, I don't know. But you need to understand, if you want to go to employment tribunal and you lose, you may have to pay the other side's costs. And this is the bit that people don't tell you. She went quiet. Then the next bit is the bit that shook me. She said that when the lawyer, the barrister now wrote to her introducing himself, basically saying he's going to be representing the other side, she said that she was very rude to him and her response was very sharp and very brazen and very rude. So I asked her to read how she responded. She was so rude to this barrister that the barrister came back to her in an email and he basically said to her, you don't need to be so rude or something. And then she went back again to be more rude. I said to her, listen, honey darling, these people have been provoking you. You ask for certain disclosure from the other side, they won't give it to you. And if they do give it to you, you're dragging your teeth. They'll be forcing you into a back and forth. You give them deadlines to come back to certain things and they don't do it. These are all provocation. But the way you have managed this provocation has been disgusting. I told her. You have now this barrister who has had nothing to do with it. Yes, he's representing the other side, but you could have framed this thing in such a way that even though he's working for the other side, he would still respond to you in such a professional way. You could even manage him to get what you want. You haven't done this here. So his first interaction with you has been rude because you have not managed the situation well and you have not framed things properly. You haven't done your due diligence. Your due diligence was just finding out what barrister chambers he belongs to. So you should have already known that you're not dealing with a child. You're dealing with a professional here. I said, my darling, based on what I've seen here, you can't manage this case. You don't have the ability to take your emotion out of it and deal with it in the way it needs to be dealt with. I personally don't get that from you. Because even as I'm talking to you, I can still see the rage. And I'm like, you're talking to me. You're asking me for help. But I'm not getting that. And I said, the situation with the podcast episode where I spoke about the girl where I managed to help her negotiate 18.5K, was because she was humble, you know. She humbled herself throughout everything in the way she dealt with me and the way she dealt with the other side, because she realized that, you know what, everything is stacked against me here. So I need to be able to get a resolution that not only am I satisfied with, that will benefit me in such a way that I can now close the door. You haven't approached this with any humility. You've approached this situation with pure arrogance and anger. And therefore, every email that you have framed has been with that same tone. And all these emails are going to end up in the employment tribunal and the judge will be reading it. So when you're trying to make out that, oh, you know, I'm just innocent, I'm this and this, the judge's going to read it and say, no, this narrative is different. When in fact, what you are is a woman who's come back from maternity leave after giving birth to a child. You have not been treated very well. You've been racially discriminated against. There's been sex discrimination. They haven't utilized their duty of care to look after you, make sure that actually you're in a physical state to return back to work. They haven't done what is expected of an employer under the Employment Rights Act. But instead of you to frame it this way, you are going to do mortal combat. Look at you now. Yeah, shaking. Your voice is shaking. Everything shake. I said to her, I'm going to tell you how to deal with this. If you don't want to learn how to deal with this one is your own problem. But you are going to have to humble yourself because you just told me you don't want to go to court. I said to her, you're going to write an email. So I told her what to put in this email. And I said to her that she should go to them and say, effectively, that she wants to settle this matter outside of court. And that this is the figure that she's looking at. And she's going to give them, I believe, 7 days, or was it 14 days, to respond. And that given the pandemic and in light of some of the lost evidence that they can't provide and etc., she thinks it would be pertinent for them to consider a settlement as a reasonable solution to this matter. The way I told her to structure this letter. So I said to her that I think I told her 15,000 to write there. But she goes, do I think she's going to get 15,000? I says, no, you'll get 5,000. You're not going to get 15,000 because you didn't manage this properly from the beginning. And they know that you want to settle this too. And you have to now humble yourself to this barrister and hope that he communicates the right thing to them. Because she also told me they've started to make people redundant and stuff like that. So I wanted her to work quite quickly while they still have cash. Because when you're making people redundant, it's because your business is not doing well. And what we didn't want to do now is they go into administration, all of this. So I needed her to act quickly. That's the bit I didn't tell her because I didn't want to scare her. Anyway, long story short, she sent that email off to them. And today she messaged me back. She says, Toya, they've come back and they went through ACAS, who is the mediator. I think they decided to go through ACAS. Why they did that, I don't know, but whatever. And they want to settle. And they offered her a settlement figure of £5,000 in full and final settlement of this case. Can you see, my avid Toya Talks listeners, the importance of framing? Can you see it here? Now, I haven't gone into all the detail about this young lady's case, but it's important that you understand that just because these people provoke you doesn't always mean you have to put pen to paper all the time. I've had to learn that. I'm still learning that. But when it comes to the world of work, I know it. I know it. Because these people just write, they just shoot up because they never think that their emails are going to end up in front of anybody who is going to be able to judge the way they are treating you. So, Oyibo people, when it comes to writing email, they can write though. You've got to understand, when you're puffing your shoulders, you're going to employment tribunal. Just remember that those judges in employment tribunal are white. You're going to have to convince white people that you have experienced racism in your white organization. So you better hope that, number one, you've got your ducks in a row. Number two, that you've managed the provocation in such a way that you've started to frame things. Can you understand why I tell you guys that you need to have your burn folders? Can you understand? Because you have to build up a pattern of, you have to build evidence. And it's not on one situation then you react. You have to show there's a pattern of behavior. And you have to be seen to be reasonable in dealing with that behavior. It is very challenging. But this young woman, if she had handled this properly, she would have got 15,000. She would have. She never managed it properly from the beginning. And you see that barrister? I told her she better thank her lucky stars. Maybe he's got a lot of work on, or maybe he just realizes that this will be a protracted tribunal. So this barrister's probably gone to the client and said, this is what it is. But you have to also understand it from the barrister's point of view. There's nothing in it for him if they settle. Because the longer this goes on, the more he gets paid. Can you see the importance of framing? Because everybody's playing a certain position here. She needs the barrister to do certain things for her to get paid. Do you understand? But when she came out all guns blazing and was so rude to this barrister that the barrister had to let her know that she was being rude. This was her first exchange of email of this barrister. She was so rude. And I needed her to understand, you don't deal with people like this. But because she's so emotional, and some people would say, oh, Toya, but it's easier said than done. Yeah, it is easier said than done. But had she managed this in a proper way, she wouldn't be walking away with 5,000. She'd be walking away with 15,000. And that is the difference between how you frame things versus how you manage things with emotions. And yes, it's an emotive situation. She was dealt with very badly. They dealt with her extremely badly. But if you know that these people have dealt with you badly, then you also know that you have a case. Why are you screaming? Why are you quarreling? I don't quarrel with employers, I don't quarrel with them. They will see me when they see my complaint. They will see me when they read the evidence in the burn folder. They will see me when they're coming now to come and at no point in any of her internal complaints did she write what she wanted. And I always tell people, when I'm talking about framing, when you're making a complaint to your organization, you have to end it. The final paragraph should say what outcome you are seeking. Because you are trusting human resources, you're trusting these managers who have basically disrespected you or who have basically treated you in a negative way to know what you want. And this is the part of communication that I feel that needs to be communicated in the exchanges of such emails or such complaints, What is it that you want? Whenever somebody comes to me for advice, that's the first question. What are you hoping to get out of this? What's your objective? This young lady told me her objective was to get paid. I said, okay. She told me her objective is that she doesn't want to go to employment tribunal. She wants it settled. I said, okay. Then that's what we're going to work towards. So when you are raising a grievance complaint, you need to ask yourself, what am I trying to gain here? What is it that I'm looking for? And then that guides you into framing what you are writing, framing the comms to get what you want. But until you understand the science of framing things, you are always going to find yourself in a combat with organizations. Constantly. And you will always be in the right. But the way in which you don't manage a situation properly and don't frame it, you will be in the wrong and you will never win. And it's not necessarily about winning or losing, but when I say win, you don't get what you want out of a situation. Framing is a difference between whether you walk away with 5,000 or walk away with 15,000. That's a fact here. The young woman, when she wrote to me, she told me, Toya, this 5K was even more than I thought. I said to her, and I'm going to read what I wrote to her. So the last message I wrote to her, I said, I'm glad you can now close this chapter and move on. What's important is the learning lessons and the personal growth you can take from this. And that is a fact. There's a lot of personal growth that she has to do. And to her credit, after we had that Zoom call, I was really hard on her because she was so stuck in her way of stubbornness that it was preventing me from helping her properly. And I think when she had an opportunity to reflect, she sent me a message and she says, thank you so much for gathering me. I needed that. I needed somebody who wasn't actually emotionally involved to basically tell me what it was. And I really hope that she learns from this, because her lack of framing and her constant emotion in this, in the communication, basically stopped her from settling this earlier and at a cost that she was happy with. So she's cost herself an extra 10 grand. And I think she realizes this. And in every situation that happens, you have to be able to do like a lessons learned. And a part of those lessons is, what did you learn about yourself that you need to improve? So I would suggest to this young lady, before you get a new role, you take a step back and understand what those learning lessons are. And when you go into an organization, put those learning lessons into practice. That has really positioned me in my career, in learning from every organization about myself. Try and find what is the negative things that I know that I need to improve. And yes, organizations, I manage it very well, but there are times when actually, I could have managed it a bit better. And being a healthy critique in the way that you frame things and the way you manage things, because no one is perfect. One thing is for sure, I know that growing up, I had a really bad temper, and I always used to let myself down because I allowed myself to be provoked, and that provocation led to anger, and that anger led to me behaving in a way that I didn't really appreciate about myself. And more importantly, I felt like it really hindered me in the world of work, where I didn't care about professionalism, I just cared about being right. And then when I realized that actually, Toya, being right isn't the strategy. That's being right isn't a strategy, because being right to who? On whose measure? You're working in a white construct built by white people, and you're having to navigate white workplaces. It's not about being right. What it is about being strategic about my objectives in an organization. And it's also about knowing when to leave. Yeah. No one talks about knowing when to leave. Framing is about you. how you position things, how you communicate, how you respond to the provocation. That's about you. Everybody's too quick to send an email. You don't know where that email's going to end up. And if you think that you can just send it and people forget about it, listen, the same way I'm telling you to build your burn folder, believe me, when organizations are ready to manage you out, they will find all those emails you sent from your first day at work 5 years ago. You better be careful. That leads me to a dilemma that I received a couple of days ago. Now, I mentioned to you guys a bit earlier about your dilemmas, and I'm just going to say it here so it's really clear. Your dilemmas has to be, number one, is 10 minutes. I give each dilemma 10 minutes, and I think that's fair because I get a lot of emails, and it's not fair that your emails are like 2 pages plus 6 attachments. That's a consultation. And it's unfair for you to send an email on Monday and chase it on Tuesday. I'm sorry, I don't work for you. I'm sorry, but I also have a life. I'm running a business. Do you understand? And I think that if you have a dilemma, you need to think about, before you send that dilemma, I've got 10 minutes of a podcast episode for her to read it out and to advise me. And I'm always going to say this. If you send me a dilemma of 2 pages plus attachments, you really don't want this dilemma to benefit the wider audience of Toya Talks, and I will no longer read those emails. I'll just delete it out of the inbox. In the same way that we need to create boundaries in our workplaces, we also have to create boundaries in our life. And I have to create boundaries too, because I am emotionally invested in Toya Talks. I am, because I'm a black woman and I want to see my fellow black women doing amazing. But being emotionally invested doesn't mean that I will now break my back and my neck because you are not considerate of the fact that, number one, that I have my own life to lead to, and number two, that I don't wake up in the morning and just decide to do a podcast. Like, I plan my podcast at least a week in advance. The treatment's done. And if you send me a dilemma before Tuesday, I try and read it the following Tuesday. I'm trying to do that. But when you are sending me attachments and you're chasing and you're doing this, you're preventing me from being able to do more than one dilemma or address your dilemma. So I need you guys to just be a bit more reasonable about what you are sending me. So I say that to say, a young lady sent me a dilemma on, I think it was a Monday. And then I think she chased it on a Tuesday or Wednesday, but my birthday was on Tuesday, and it's like, I don't work on my birthday. And basically saying that she's being chased for something. And my assistant, God bless her heart, basically went back to her and said, no, sorry, like, this is not how we do things. But I've taken the time because I feel like I haven't set the parameters for the dilemmas, which is my own fault, and I'm setting them right now. So I am going to read out this young lady's dilemma, not the 3 pages and attachments. I'm not doing that. I've already read the attachment, so I have the backstory. But I'm going to read her dilemma really quickly, and I'm going to give you the advice. And I think this dilemma is very, very important. And this is why I'm going to read it, because it's important so that you guys can understand about framing, which is the core theme of this episode. Mistreatment by registered recruitment firm in dire need of advice. Good afternoon, Toya. I hope you're well. I've been an avid follower and supporter of your platform for over 2 years now. From watching you record your daily commute into work via Snapchat, to now listening to your podcast on Spotify and coming so close to seeing you in person last month at Toya Talks 2.0, which hasn't taken place. Nevertheless, I appreciate your input and value your wisdom. Unfortunately, it's with a heavy heart I write this email. I already know how you feel about recruitment companies. Hun, I feel the same way. Insert eye roll. I have listened to the podcast episode, Employment Agencies, Managing Them to Get What You Want. Believe me, I would rather have nothing to do with recruitment firms at all. I've had my fair share of bad interactions with consultants. So before I continue, I'm just going to say, I don't have an issue with recruitment consultants, okay, and recruitment businesses. I just know how to manage them because a lot of them are hopeless. But at the end of the day, there are recruitment firms who are good, and it's about managing them to get the best out of them and effectively get a role that is suitable for you. I also believe in having a preferred, almost like a preferred supplier list of recruitment agencies, but that requires an investment in a relationship, and you can only invest in a relationship if you know how to manage them to get what you want. So I don't necessarily feel a certain way, I just know that there are bad ones out there. Anyway, this situation I'm in, however, began in April 2020 and has since led to a number of grievous errors made by the company on which I am on their payroll. I'm a temporary worker for a particular recruitment agency, so let's call them Tiger Recruitment Agency. I registered in November 2019 at 2 branches in the city. I want to brief you as my initial email to managing director outlines my grievances. To bullet point my grievances: delayed furlough payment. When finally being added to the furlough scheme, it was over 3 weeks until I received payment. All the mishaps have been down to payroll. I have proof of email sent, etc., etc. Incorrect tax code, being I am a temp worker, I receive my wages weekly, and so my pay slip weekly also. My initial furlough payment was taxed over £200, an extortionate amount, due to me being on a OT tax code. So I think that might be an emergency tax code. This occurred thrice. And this occurred thrice more until, so this basically happened 3 times up until August. I contacted HMRC to ask why, and basically they came back to her and basically said that it was the agency's fault, I'm assuming. Yeah, the payroll agency. Issue with the holiday pay. The timesheet submission portal does not list your accrual in holiday pay. Note that there are a note on pay slips. I don't know how to read this. I think this only serves to work in their favour. Okay, no. Online pay slips. All 6 of my pay slips dating from Wednesday the 5th of August, I'm not able to view and download and retain for my records. Clearly, it's a fault of the IT. The director of Tiger Recruitment knows this and so decided to send me my most recent pay slip in October via email along with a password, but it failed and it still doesn't open. I believe I should be compensated at least a 4-figure settlement. I would be grateful for at least £3,000, but I'm aiming for £5,000. I know that this company is worth multi-millions. They are part of a conglomerate of at least 6 others globally. When I spoke to the director over the phone, she informed me that the firm decided to pay temporary workers because receiving funds from the government, and it was in the millions. I have not begun to mention the impact this whole debacle with Tiger Recruitment has had on my anxiety. I was deeply frustrated and worried daily about the ongoing mistreatment I suffered. I would be happy to send you the initial emails that I sent to the managing director and the response from the investigation. The director sent me 2 days later. Although the decent explanation I'm still not personally satisfied with, any help you can offer will be greatly appreciated. So I've read the email exchanges between her and Tiger Recruitment, and effectively Tiger Recruitment did an investigation. And they acknowledge that there's been some failings, in the process of furlough payments, the discrepancies in holiday pay and things like that. But I want to first tackle her initial email to Tiger Recruitment. It read like a 4-page essay. That's how it read. It read like an essay. And I think it's about how you frame it and the structure. Within the first couple of lines of a complaint, I should know what your issues are. I shouldn't have to be trudging through this whole thing to pull out your issues. You should make them very clear. And as somebody who is dyslexic, I find that what makes it easier for me is to put things into subheadings. So if I know I have an issue with payroll, I have a subheading that says payroll. If I have an issue with holiday accrual, I have one that says holiday. And then I'll be able to slot in there what my issues are, and I keep it at a paragraph each. Because you just need to get to the point. You just need to get to the point, because this person who's reading this, you need to garner their attention. And more importantly, you need their call to, your complaint needs to be a call to action. You need them to do something. And then in the conclusion, you should tell them what you are seeking as a resolution to your complaint. That isn't more than a page at best. Now, when I was reading what she sent over, it was a lot. and you can see there was a lot of emotion in here, which I completely understand, because this is your bread and butter. This is how you're making your money, and they're basically messing you up. And I just felt that you could have taken the emotion out of it. I did feel that way, because ultimately what you're trying to do is just get paid. And these organisations, they're waiting for the furlough payment, but they have money that they can pay you guys as they're waiting for that furlough payment, which I think they did end up doing. But a couple of things. So you want a settlement based on what? Based on what? Why should they settle you £3,000 to £5,000? I'm not understanding. For the stress, I'm assuming, because they messed up the furlough payments, because you were emergency taxed, and basically because of the stress. In an ideal world, that would probably happen. This is not an ideal world. And there is no legal contravention of the employment law rights that would force their hands to pay between 3,000 and 5,000. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but you don't have a case here. I'm just going to tell you honestly. They did an investigation and they found certain things in your favour. But unless there is a claim from an unlawful deduction of wages, which is a contravention of the Employment Rights Act, but you still would have to follow a system, i.e. you'd have to draw it to their attention, give them the opportunity to rectify it, give them a letter before action, and then go to court. But that's not what I'm getting here. What I'm getting here is they have kind of resolved it, although they've kind of gone round the houses. But you don't have a case here, darling. And when you are a temporary worker, I'm not sitting here saying you have no employment rights. You do, but you have less employment rights. If you were a permanent member of staff, you'd have more employment rights. But because you're a temporary worker, your employment rights, you don't have as many, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, the furlough scheme was a very messed up scheme because it happened quite quickly. It was response to a global pandemic. And a lot of people and a lot of organisations really struggled to interpret what would be categorized as, how furlough payments would be implemented. And there was a delay in the government getting those furlough payments out. HMRC didn't even have enough information. I know all of this because I run a business, and there were certain things that I had to talk to my accountant about. And he is an amazing accountant, but he couldn't get that information to me because he didn't understand it. He didn't know, because the comms that were coming out from HMRC were quite contradictory. The furlough payment scheme literally happened quick, and people were trying to figure things out. And I'm not justifying what Tiger Recruitment did here, but what I am saying is Tiger Recruitment were in the same situation as a lot of companies. Now, the only thing I will say is I know that you talk about how they messed up the payroll, they created 2 profiles, etc. I get all of that. But unfortunately, this is an admin error. Unless that admin error has caused you to lose money, number one, you're not getting 3,000 to 5,000. I'll tell you that now. But if it's caused you to lose money, if you could prove that it's caused you to lose money and evidence it, you can then ask them to reimburse you, of course. But that's it. The emergency tax code thing, unfortunately, I think a lot of the Toy Talks podcast listeners, we've all been stung by an emergency tax code. And sometimes that has been, like, in my early career, I didn't even know what a P45 was. And when I didn't get a P45, I had a P46. And then, you have to call HMRC and sort it out and stuff like that. So emergency tax codes, it happens. But one thing I'm going to say about HMRC, which I never thought I'd ever say, is when HMRC owe you money, you'll get it. That's it. Like, I have never ever been owed money by HMRC and they've not given it to me. They always do. Especially when I've been emergency tax, and they sometimes will give it back to me through my pay. And you could get a really lovely person on the phone and they can walk you through what that procedure looks like. So then this young lady sent me a follow-up email. So I'm sorry, I said that she emailed me on Monday, which she did, which was the 5th of October, but then she chased me on the Friday. So I apologise. I said that she chased me the next day. That's not true. She chased me on the Friday, but still, do you know what I mean? And basically, Tiger Recruitment had done an internal investigation because obviously she made a complaint. And their findings were that, yes, to an extent she was right. There had been some failings on their side. This is how they're rectifying it, etc., etc. But obviously she's not happy with it because she wants money out of them. And you're not going to get that money. I can tell you for free right now, you're not going to get it. I think you just have to accept that this has been a very, very turbulent situation with the pandemic. I think you also need to take your emotions out of it. I know the anxiety that this would have caused you. Of course I understand it, because this is your bread and butter. And if you're not getting paid, you're not eating. I understand that. But if you have been paid right now and, your emergency tax code, you've kind of sorted out, because more importantly, than getting the money back from the emergency tax code is making sure now you're on the correct tax. So as long as you're on the correct tax, hopefully any refunds will come through on your next pay. But the reality of this situation is you've now emailed me on Friday and you said that I'm writing this email. Hang on. You wrote to me, "Hi Toya, I'm writing this. I hope you're well. I'm writing this email in relation to the earlier email sent on the 5th of October. I do not mean to prompt you to give me a response, but the senior executive at Target Recruitment have now started prompting me to close this case. I would hate to shoot myself in the foot and write an email I think you would say. I know it would be a poor attempt and may not compare to your expertise. Please do read the emails listed below. I did try. The initial email I sent to," and she wrote the name there, "I think was written eloquently. As mentioned in my prior email, I'm seeking monetary compensation and would be happy to brief you over the phone or on Skype if you need things clarified." No, I don't need things clarified. I think that you just need to understand that you don't have a basis for any type of compensation other than the stress that it's given you, but there is no legal obligation for them to give you any money because of stress. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. You can ask. Listen, there's nothing wrong with asking. But when they say no, what next? And are you hoping to be working with this recruitment company in the future? I mean, are you, you're on furlough, but end of October, the furlough scheme ends. Are you then going to go back to work? Like, how is that going to work? And I think that that's something you need to think about, like how you're moving forward with this recruitment company. You are in the right. They've done this investigation. They agree with you. And I think that you might have to just accept that there has been a lot of admin errors in which you have been on the receiving end of. And whilst I understand, and anyone reading this will understand that your stress has stressed you out, it's upset you, that's not the basis for a compensation. I think that, I hope that people realise that it's not easy getting money from organisations, for anything, even if they've breached your employment law rights. And you have to have almost a watertight case, have some type of a case against them to force their hand into considering giving you anything. Because I asked the question again with this dilemma, what law has been breached here? It's not racial discrimination. It's not sex discrimination. It's not victimization. It's just poor admin. It's poor processing and a lack of understanding of the furlough scheme. So hopefully that helps this young lady out. I know sometimes I can be quite harsh with the dilemma responses, and I'm telling the reason I am is because I need a lot of you to think outside of the box a little bit, and I think sometimes you need to remove emotions out of it. A lot of the things that I think I've achieved at work is because I've had to put my emotions to one side, and I've had to go into organisations and deal with things on a very transactional basis, or at least understand what everybody's motives are in a certain situation. I think one thing I'm always going to promise you guys is that when you send me a dilemma, I'm going to, number one, be fair, firm, but I will help you. I will try my best to help you, because I also recognize the courage it takes to reach out to somebody and ask for help. Like, I completely understand it, and I want this to be a safe space of conversation. But in order for it to be a safe space, we have to be honest. And sometimes that honesty is going to make us uncomfortable. But in that uncomfortable honesty comes something beautiful. It comes a possible solution that you may not have even thought of. It comes a solution that you could at least be able to consider, and a possible way forward. So guys, I'm going to end it there. I'm going to close this episode of the Toy Talks podcast. I've actually enjoyed this episode, and I'm hoping that you guys have understood and appreciate the importance of framing and how you frame things to get what you want this dilemma that I just, read and advised on, her framing her complaint, she didn't tell them what she wanted. When I read it, she didn't actually say that she wants financial compensation. I didn't read it there, unless I completely missed it. I didn't see it there, and it wasn't quantified what that compensation would look like. So when they've come back with the findings of their investigation, there's no mention of it, because she didn't tell them what she wanted. And I think we need to get comfortable in situations that are quite difficult to tell people what we want. What I want to solve this situation, what I want to help in this resolution, we need to work on communicating that. And I think part of it is because we're not encouraged to tell people what we want. We're not. We're made to feel like we're the problem. So solution isn't even a conversation, right? Because we're made to feel as black women that we're the problem. We're not the problem. Sometimes a system is actually the problem, but it's how you frame things and communicate things that will kind of give you the solution or the reaction that you want to be able to achieve something. I hope that this has helped you guys. I hope that you guys really understand the essence of this episode, but more importantly, that you've learned from this episode. I want to thank you guys for supporting me. All your birthday wishes on the 6th of October were greatly appreciated. All your prayers, all your comforting words, and your sharing how the Toy Talks podcast has transformed your working life. I've really, really appreciated it. I can't wait for 2021. And I say I can't wait for it because 2020 has been so bad, but then I have anxiety about what awaits us in 2021. I will say that, it's really important that we self-care, and that goes for me too. We all need to self-care and just be safe, because it seems like we're walking into a second lockdown, and I hope that we've learned lessons from the first lockdown. If you guys aren't already following me on my social media pages, go ahead and do so. My personal Instagram page is Toya_Washington. The Toya Talks podcast Instagram page is Toya_Talks. Twitter is Toya_W. Snapchat is Toya Washington, all one word. If you have a dilemma, please email hello@toyatalks.com. Please keep it as brief as possible. Give me a summary, and I will endeavour and do my best to help you. If you are listening to this episode or the Toy Talks podcast in general on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. Leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, because I do love to read it and see what you guys are feeling and thinking about the podcast. And it really helps other people who are new to the podcast to be able to make a decision about whether they want to engage and listen to the podcast. And yeah, just thank you guys so much. Please, if there's anybody you think that can benefit from the Toy Talks podcast, please share with them on social media or just by text, phone, whatever. Just share this podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me for another episode of the Toy Talks podcast, engaging each and every Tuesday, because we know every Tuesday is a brand new episode of the Toy Talks podcast. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.